A very good afternoon on this lovely Sunday afternoon for us here in South Africa, or it may be morning or evening, wherever you may be. But thank you so much for joining us. We are about to embark on our daily excursions across all of the different cameras brought to you by Wild Earth and Africam across southern, western, and eastern Africa, or southwestern, I should say, and eastern Africa. It's live at the Waterhole time. My name is Ben Coley. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours. And as always, to remind those of you who are regular watchers and for those of you who are new to the show, this is live and interactive. I am here to answer any and all questions, read out your comments, and anything else you would like to ask. So please do send in your questions as per what you see on the screen. And it's always wonderful to hear from you all what you're thinking, any interesting sightings that you've had lately, anything that you've always wanted to know about. Do send them through. And where you're from as well. It's always nice to know how many parts of the globe we are reaching. But we've started this afternoon at Naledi Dam in Olifants West Game Reserve, where we have a couple of elephants that were enjoying drinking the cleaner water from the well when we arrived, and now enjoying a little bit of a spray out of the slightly less cleansed water. But lovely to see so much water around still. We are beginning to move into autumn and on through to winter, and we are probably going to have quite a dry period now. There is the chance of rain next week, I noticed in this area, but after that it would not be unusual to have 6 months without any rain whatsoever. So important that these animals make use of the water whilst they can. It's always a bit of a difficult time for them during the winter. But that is the natural cycle of things here. The animals are very used to it. And of course, because of tourism and conservation and the landowners and national parks, there are a variety of waterholes that remain filled, trickle filled, just allowing the animals the opportunity to quench their thirst when the time comes. It's always interesting to see how the elephants will much rather take the cleaner water for drinking and then use opportunities like this to have a bit of a bathe, apply some sunblock, have a bit of a natural exfoliation, using all the mud and the sediment and the particles that are in there. And always lovely to see how accurate they are when they deposit that water onto their skin. You can see those little cracks in the elephant skin, all designed to absorb a lot of that water, keep the skin moister for longer. And even the skin itself has little crevices and things on a microscopic level, just to help regulate that temperature and not get too hot in the sometimes baking African sun. Good afternoon, Wendy H. from a very humid PE down in the east. And I'm glad that you are joining us again on what apparently is your favourite Wild Earth show. Well, I hope we can help it live up to expectations today. We never know what we're going to get. We saw some interesting things yesterday, some ground squirrels. What else did we have yesterday? Lots of elephants, some giraffe drinking, some nice bird life. But yeah, you just never know what we might get. Oh, we had some ostriches. They were rather fun. Had 4 ostriches up at Tower yesterday, which we watched for quite a while. It seems this big cow seems to have achieved full coverage, or coverage of which she is happy with. And time to wander off. Another busy day of feeding. So make use of the vegetation. You can see how the felt is starting to brown off a little bit now. So any sort of last minute rains would be greatly appreciated. Elephants, remember, during the summer months will be eating the majority grass. Maybe 70–80% of their diet will be made up of the nice succulent grasses. And then as everything dries up and disappears, the annuals die off, the perennial grasses die back, and just rely on those rhizomes, those root structures to see them through the dry periods. Most of the trees that we have out here are deciduous, and the ones that aren't do not taste very nice, so the elephants will move very much more during the winter to a diet of cambium, that phloem layer beneath the bark of trees, and they'll eat twigs and any other vegetation that they can find, but a lot harder to find food during those winter months. Ollie the oxpecker, you're in Johannesburg. Do we ever see lions at the waterholes? Well, we do, Ollie, but not often, I have to say, just because of the time of day that live at the waterhole goes out, so 12:30 until 2:30, often a very, very hot part of the day, and lions and most of the other predators being nocturnal. Generally, this time of day, they are going to be slumbering in the shade somewhere. But you never know. We have, I think, in the last year or 18 months that I've been doing this that I can think of, we saw lions briefly at Cat-Eye Pan, I think, and we saw a leopard at one of the Kapama waterholes, if I remember rightly. So it does happen, but just not very often, I'm afraid. But if you keep an eye on the cameras throughout the day and throughout the evenings in particular, because you can access them online, then you'll have a much greater chance of seeing a predator. But we always live in hope. It is kind of what we're all looking forward to, that maybe the camera pans around and happens to bump into a leopard or a lion heading in for a midday drink. It does happen. There are certain lion prides that I've worked around in the past that seem to be more active during the day than the nighttime. The old Shumungwe pride in the western sector of the Sabi Sands, which I believe is no longer, unfortunately. We used to regularly see them moving around during the daytime and hunting at sort of 9, 10 o'clock, even in the middle of the summer months when it's 40 degrees outside. So you never can tell. So everybody have some PMA, a positive mental attitude, and let's all put our collective psyches together and try and bring in some predator action for today. A small group of elephants just sort of gradually dissolving into the bushes. But we are going to chance our arm at somewhere else. I think possibly Victoria Falls. I didn't quite hear clearly, but let's go have a look. It was Vic Falls. Excellent. And we've got some warthogs and the ubiquitous Egyptian goose, which is everywhere. But nice to see some warthogs. Hopefully we'll get some having a roll around in the mud. Normally when we come to Vic Falls Safari Lodge, I associate this waterhole with the bird life. There's often marabou storks, and we saw a black heron here at one point, I think, and a few vultures coming down. So we'll see if we get any bird activity, but lovely to see some young warthogs here. Lightly born, probably around about November, December, looking at their size. I'm not quite sure what the birthing season is in Zimbabwe, if it will be particularly different from here in South Africa, but we would normally expect the little warthogs to come through somewhere around sort of end of November during December. But if that is Mum in the middle, she doesn't look like an old female. Possibly that's even a juvenile as opposed to an adult female, but either way, if all 5 of those are related, the little ones, Mum has done very well to get 5 of them through to this age. They are, of course, often targeted by a variety of predators, lion, leopard, even some of the larger eagles, martial eagles. I've actually seen a martial eagle have a crack at a young warthog once, was unsuccessful. Snakes, another potential issue. But that does look like Mum, but she looks like a young Mum. But obviously very successful. Good for her. All the little ones sporting that prominent white moustache that they have, which is just a way, we think, to potentially dupe a potential predator that at a glance they may look like fully established tusks or tushes, as they would be called in warthogs. Therefore, defense, obviously, they haven't grown at this stage of their life. So perhaps, say, a quick look, a predator might mistake those difty white hairs as potential dangerous stabbing implements. And that might just buy the warthogs that split second to get away, to get into a hole, or to get away from danger. Looks like they are taking advantage of that nice green grass that's got access to that water. You can see how, particularly up there, everything else in the background has very much dried out and gone that classic orangey brown colour that we associate with the drier seasons here in southern Africa. Little blacksmith lapwing wading around in the foreground with that very obvious black apron stretching from the neck down to the chest. Looks like as I said, the apparel of a blacksmith, as well as the very characteristic noise, that clink, clink, clink noise that they make, that supposedly sounds, well, supposedly it does sound like a hammer being bashed onto an anvil. Ian, that's a good question. You're asking, is the material in warthog warts the same as giraffe ossicones? Honestly, Ian, I would have to go and check, but I think, and I will let you know if I do find out anything different, that is just more sort of calloused skin in warthogs as opposed to the ossicones in giraffe, which starts out as cartilage and then becomes bone. But whether the constitution of it when they are still young, before it has ossified and become bone in giraffes, is similar to that of warthogs, that I would need to check. But the giraffe ossicones when they're young is definitely cartilage, and I believe this is more just like calloused skin as opposed to cartilage, because that is flexible. Those young ossicone, or the ossicones of young giraffe, is flexible. They can bend and move around, which is why you sometimes see giraffe with deformed ossicones that got bumped or moved when they were younger, often with the males if they are sparring and doing a little bit of play fighting. A knock at the wrong trajectory might cause that ossicone to move slightly, and then when it does ossify, it may then sort of set in a position that looks a little bit unnatural. I've never seen that happen before in warthogs. It seems to be a slow sort of growth process. So I would think it's more sort of layers of calloused skin. But I will see what I can find out for you. It's an interesting question. Thank you, Ian. This must be Mum. You can see the teats when the camera allows. And they do seem to be following her fairly intently, but she's definitely still young, looking at the size of her tusks, the size of those warts. So very well done, Mrs. Warthog, for getting 5 youngsters to this age. We wish you all the best in the future. But we're going to zoom a little bit further north now. We're going to head up to Oldonyo and see what is afoot at the waterhole there. The classic Oldonyo scene, elephant next to the inflow pipe and a whole bunch of giraffe waiting their turn. And there's a bit of an example of some necking behavior in the background. Beautiful sort of ballet that ensues. They wave those necks around and try and hit each other with those ossicones. So that's what I was referring to when they're a young age and they're just play fighting like they are here, just establishing dominance and social hierarchies. If those ossicones haven't fully set, they could just be nudged off their normal position. Picasso, you say you live in Hriki, which is not far here from Hoedspruit, in Balula, and you almost stepped on a lioness who was sleeping on the cool floor of your patio. Well, I'm glad you did not actually step on the lioness, and I assume that you escaped without too much issue. And you're saying she peed all over the place, and is that a sign of attracting a male? Um, I don't think so necessarily, Picasso, to be honest. Lions quite regularly, when they are sleeping, they can't be bothered to move when they pee. Same as hyenas. I have seen them just sort of pee without moving. Although that being said, often they will get up and move off to one side when it is time to ablute. Um, so whether or not that's specifically trying to attract a male, I don't think so, but never say never. Of course, the important part will be the balance of hormones and the pheromones that are contained within that urine that may or may not attract a male. Certainly, if a male did come into the area, he would analyze that urine. We would see that classic, what we call the phlegm grimace, where they sort of pull their lips back and look as if they're sort of snarling, but actually accessing that vomeronasal organ, or the organ of Jacobson or Jakobsen, named, I think it was a Danish biologist who figured that one out, to analyze all of that specific information contained within the urine. But I imagine she was just very comfortable, as you said, on your cool floor. I don't know if you would agree with me that last night was a bit warmer than it has been. There was a bit of light cloud cover last night, and it was quite humid. And there was quite a few insects around last night, more so than we've seen over the last week or two. In fact, I've even felt the need to put on a fleece once or twice over the last couple of weeks, but it was really a little bit warmer and sticky last night. So I'm sure she was enjoying that cool, I assume, tiled or concrete floor of your patio. Ollie the Oxpecker, is nice to see some elephants. Yeah, pretty much a guarantee up here at Oldonyo. These big bulls do seem to come in throughout the day and enjoy this nice clean water here. And Jessica saying that necking of the giraffe is such an interesting behavior. It really is, Jessica. It's amazing how they coordinate it all, how they don't topple over, but they can do some serious, serious damage. An awful lot of momentum. That skull is very, very heavy and bony. It is a little bit like a medieval mace. So the longer the neck, the heavier your head, the more effective the weapon. And if you have ever witnessed two male giraffe having a full-blooded fight, it is really quite the sight to behold. You can hear the thuds, the impact from hundreds of meters away potentially, and when they get really involved, they use their legs and they kind of jostle for position, almost sort of like judo perhaps. So they try and hook each other's legs and hamper their opponent's movements, and they will either go for the flank or for the neck itself with those impacts. And so they are capable of doling out some severe amounts of energy and power. been reports of an eland that was killed by a strike from a giraffe. People have been killed and died of their injuries of being smacked by one of those giraffes' heads. I know of a giraffe that had its neck broken by another one that just happened to hit at the right angle and the sufficient amount of power. So never underestimate a giraffe, be it with its ability to neck or its ability to kick. But it really is beautiful to watch. They often miss each other completely, and these huge necks flying around. So it does become like a dance to watch. Scusa, you wanted to know how many liters of water does the elephant drink? Well, of course, there are many variables. Males require more water than females because they've got a larger body mass. The time of the year will also play a role. What is the ambient temperature? How much moisture are they attaining from the vegetation that they are eating? But for a big adult bull elephant, during the winter when he does require a lot of sort of top-ups of water, you can assume somewhere around about the 150 to maybe even 200 liters of water per day that is required. If he was to be in must, I can see a little bit of secretions from this one, but it certainly doesn't look like full must to me. That can also cause them to lose 20, 30 liters of fluid a day by those temporal gland secretions, by the dripping of urine, which is a constant action that happens during heavy must. So then their water requirements would probably be even more. Let's see if we get a little greeting ceremony here. This one's made way for what does look like a slightly bigger bull. So that actually, if anything, actually, I might suggest the one on the right is slightly older, just looking at the sunken temples and the width of the bridge of the nose. Interesting how the other one has made a little bit of space. Interesting to watch these little interactions between these two bulls. Certainly, I think the one with the one tusk in the foreground is the slightly older of the two. But you can see they had a little bit of a sort of a nudge and a nuzzle, and this one took a good sniff of the slightly younger bull's sensitive areas, shall we say. Just got some of that hormonal information we were just talking about with the lions. But I would think they've probably come into contact with each other before, and I think we could possibly even say that these two are companions of some sort. They've probably bumped into one another on multiple occasions, just renewing some bonds. Lovely to see a couple of ellies and some giraffe sparring from earlier. Let's stay in Kenya, but head over to Lentor to see what's happening at that little waterhole over there. We've got a lovely troop of baboons enjoying a drink. Always one of my favourite waterholes. Bird life. Yesterday we had the ground squirrels out and about. These baboons and sometimes some vervet monkeys, also regular visitors. Always nice to watch their rather human-like antics. Some nice grooming going on in the middle, looking for those little ectoparasites. And always fun to see the youngsters skipping around as well. Oh, look at this little tiny one. Beautiful. That classic baboon pose with the forearms resting on the thighs and that sort of downward facing palm, almost sort of yoga-ish stance that they often do adopt when they're relaxing. Jessica, yes, very, very tiny. These are olive baboons, of course, different from the chacma baboons that we get down here in southern Africa. I would love to offer you a suggestion of age, but I wouldn't be confident to do so. But not more than a month or two old, I wouldn't have thought, that little tiny one that we saw. But quite a few young ones, sort of slightly older, these three causing trouble together, no doubt, or four of them, in fact. I think coming back as a baboon might be quite a fun lifestyle. You like the idea of being able to bounce around the trees with reckless abandon. Looks like a nice social gathering to be a part of as well. Oh, look at this youngster. Hopefully if we can get that one in focus, we can see that beautiful pink face. Very, very pink ears as well. Having a good drink. How beautiful is that? Strong fingers that you can see as well. It's very interesting to watch them. I think we can all relate pretty well to baboons and to vervet monkeys and the other primates. There's something that very much draws us to them, and we take particular interest in watching their activities. But yeah, really complex social bonding between all of those members there. Like they're both gazing into each other's eyes. What a beautiful photo. That is an award-winning photograph. Oh, look at the way she's maneuvering. Time for a little groom. The way the big male also sort of showing a little bit of interest. Maternal instinct, of course, is strong in all animals, but I think we can just really relate to it more in these primates. Sean, you're asking if there's a clear leader in a baboon troop and how the structure differs from vervet monkeys. Well, baboons have what's called an oligarchy. So generally there is a group of dominant males, but there will normally be a super dominant male, and he will have a sort of a group of dominant-ish males under him, and they together help to look after the troop, and he has to watch them. They will attempt to overthrow him at some point. It's not unusual for that to happen. So we call it an oligarchy. So it's a group of dominant males, one of whom will kind of rule the roost with the assistance of the others. But yeah, he must always watch out because they're always jostling for a hierarchical position. Whereas in vervet monkeys, there's normally just a dominant male who looks after everybody. Often will be the one seen sitting atop the tree, often with his legs spread, showing off the bright colours of his personal area as a visual cue of his dominance. But not known for having that same sort of oligarchy system that the baboons do. Having his moustache tended to there. I guess, do baboons ever try playing in water? I haven't seen them sort of say, I mean, they go in and out of water sometimes, but I wouldn't say they go into water, whether or not that is just an evolutionary thing to avoid potential predation from crocodiles. They are capable of swimming. You sometimes see baboons kind of wading across water channels and things, but they don't seem to, they're not water babies, put it that way. They don't seek out the opportunity to swim very often that I've seen. But I wouldn't be surprised if the youngsters sometimes do sort of frolic around in small waterways, that they'll avoid deep water from a safety perspective. Mr. Nick Power 04, why do they have blue bums? Um, in baboons, it's normally a pink colour. I haven't noticed blue per se. That may have just been a more of a trick of the camera or the saturation levels of this particular camera, or um, a trick of the light through with the sunlight through the clouds. Um, why they have it in males, I'm not so sure, but in females, it's very much a visual cue. We know that baboons and other primates do see in color. They have very similar vision to us, whereas a lot of other animals lack the red visual cell within the eye, so they have more dichromatic color as opposed to trichromatic color vision, which is what we have. So particularly the females will have a very obvious red bottom, and when they are in estrus, it becomes even more sort of swollen and obvious. That one's firmly attached. Big thing to be a part of the grooming. You do sometimes find in baboons that males that are kind of making a play or trying to establish some hierarchy will steal youngsters from females and kind of hold them hostage to get extra attention or extra affection and try and build dominance within the group. This is two females, I think, just kind of helping each other out. Dark Mane, another good question. How long have baboons been on Earth? Um, I'll be honest with you, Dark Mane Lover, I don't know off the top of my head. I have just had a quick look online for you. And the first return that I've got, and so we never trust everything that we read online without first substantiating it. But at a quick look, it seems that they evolved over millions of years with their ancestors emerging in Africa 2 to 3 million years ago. And the genus of Papio, which includes the baboons, probably appeared between 1.5 and 2 million years ago. There were some really beautiful, intimate moments being shared. Lovely to watch. I'm just thinking, Mr. Nick Power, back to your question about the blues. I'm not sure if perhaps you were referring to the vervet monkeys, which have very, very obvious turquoise blue bright testicles, particularly the dominant males. Again, just very much a visual display sign. That's why they will often sit up in the tree with everything on full view. It is a real case of look at me, look at these. I am the big man, and I'm showing everybody that that is the case. So a lot of visual communication, particularly in animals that have quite acute color vision. It's a really good way of communicating with one another. Most animals rely on smell. There's also a big reliance upon sound and a lot of body language. But in terms of specific visual cues that can um, show you dominance and reproductive status, you'll see that more in animals that have very acute color vision. So we see good examples of that in birds, which also see very well in color with the changes in plumage. The ostriches we saw yesterday, when a male is in full breeding garb, everything becomes a lot redder, the front of the shins, the beak. Again, more visual cues for those groups of animals that have more acute vision and can pick up a far wider range of colour. Think of the beautiful birds of paradise. the way that many birds here go into what we call their eclipse plumage during the winter months, which is fairly dull and drab, and then in the summer months they spend all of that biological energy to molt those feathers and produce these great bright contrasting feathers to really advertise their status to the ladies. Why there are some that don't do that, take the rollers for example, the beautifully coloured lilac breasted roller where male and female are the same and they don't change throughout the year, that I've never been quite sure about. I can only assume that it works well enough the way it is and there is no point spending the biological energy to change those things. Lovely, probably red-billed firefinches. Again, males more brightly coloured than the females, and during the breeding season, the red becomes more prominent, more obvious. And Raphael, how long do baboons nurse for? I think it's normally sort of up to a year or less than a year, but they will remain in the troop for quite a while. I think full maturity, maybe sort of 3, 4, 5 years of age. What age they actually disperse from the troop, particularly the males looking for their own opportunities, that I would need to check for you. But I believe the weaning period, somewhere between 6 months to a year of sort of full-blooded nursing, which will obviously diminish as the months go by and that animal becomes more independent and less dependent on the mother. But with that strong social bond that they have, oh, look at that beautiful butterfly. One of the friars, I think. My butterfly knowledge is not wonderful. Again, what we might find up there in Kenya may differ very much from what we get down here, but beautiful markings nonetheless. But I think we're going to head back down to Naledi. We've got some more elephants coming for a drink. Let's go have a look. Oh, wow. Okay, it seems that we stayed very briefly at Naledi and now we've come up to Vic Falls Safari Lodge to see a beautiful male bushbuck taking advantage of a salt lick, which has obviously been put out to benefit the animals. You see salt, sodium, an important requirement. But nice to see bushbuck out in the open, normally very much restricted to more heavily vegetated areas, very sort of riverine areas. Not often we get such clear views of them. Beautiful antelope though, and potentially very dangerous with those horns. Many a hunter has got the wrong end of those horns in a leg, but lovely markings. You see a mixture of stripes and spots and those beautiful legs. Always reminds me of those sort of skeleton costumes that we used to make as childs, where you get like a pair of black tracksuit pants and then draw the bones on and things. That's always what I think of when I see the front legs, particularly of a bushbuck. Yeah, but lovely to see a few bushbuck. Oh, look at a youngster as well. possibly taking advantage of a few sort of shrubs and forbs that are springing up in this area, possibly being a little bit closer to the water. That's a shame. We obviously struggled to get focus on the bushbuck there, but nice close up on the mapani leaves. And those lovely bilobed leaf structures that they have. Mapani coming from, I believe it's one of the Zimbabwean languages. I shan't say exactly which one because I'm not 100% sure, but it does mean butterfly on account of those sort of butterfly-shaped wings. And you'll see a lot of those leaves are closed, as the Mapani do close them during the heat of the day or sort of angle them just to avoid water loss. But very, very nice to see some bushbuck out in the open. All right, let's head back up to Old Donyo in Kenya. Oh, hello. What have we got here? Looks like it's possibly a juvenile African hawk eagle, African harrier hawk, I would think, the old formerly named gymnogene, assuming they do occur up there, but you can see the bare skin around the face and the unfeathered legs, so definitely not a true eagle. I would say that looks like a juvenile African hawk eagle. African harrier hawk, I always get those two mixed up. So that's very cool to see. If anybody wishes to correct me, because say what actually does occur up in Old Donyo, I do stand to be corrected, but that is the gut feel from what I would have thought. But not something you see every day coming down for a drink. Nina Brown, you're asking, can animals get extra minerals from the soil as well? Absolutely, they can. You know, we even have a name for it. It's called geophagia, the eating of soil. We see it quite often, particularly during the winter months when the available food is not quite so prevalent. So yes, lots of salts and sort of phosphoruses and sodiums and other things that the animals need. You often see zebras doing it. I've seen elephants doing it. Quite a few antelope and other ungulates that will indeed feed on soil. Well, brief, but pretty amazing. Yeah, I'm definitely going to go with juvenile African harrier hawk. Of course, when they do get a little bit older, they'll develop those much more sort of slate grey and black contrasting feathers and that beautiful yellowish face, which, a bit like the monkeys we were saying, and other birds will also change colour during the breeding season. That yellow will turn to a more pinkish red, and it can happen really quickly. I've seen it happen before. It only takes a few seconds, also as a response to general sort of stress or heightened emotions. It seems we'll be graced with some drinking giraffes. Beautiful scenes of these giraffe drinking. That's not often the raptors will have a chance. This waterhole always seems to be busy between the elephants and giraffe, and occasionally some eland and oryx and zebras. So I guess the raptors take the opportunity when they can. Ivan in North Carolina, you're saying you've heard the terms global warming and climate change being used interchangeably. Is this valid? And have we observed any effects of either in the wildlife of South Africa? Well, I would say that the two are relatively interchangeable. I mean, climate change is climate change. It could go in any direction. There have been ice ages in the past, and I'm sure there will be again with the very long-term cycle. But yes, the biggest problem very much is global warming. I don't think anybody could, well, there are some who still do, but the majority of people will agree that the average temperatures across the globe are increasing, leading to the ice caps melting and so on and so forth, and drier, more arid environments. Have we observed any specific effects here in South Africa? It's a very good question. I'm going to have to think about that if I've actually sort of noticed anything. I would say, as a rule, I would say yes, possibly we have had less rain recently than we have done previously. I don't have all the figures that I could give you, unfortunately. Whether that is as a result of specific global warming, um, I'm not sure because there are other factors that are much shorter term and natural factors like the El Niños and things that happen over much shorter time scales. Um, I'm not quite sure what the forecasts are for the coming years, but having been here for 20 years, have I noticed a particular difference? Just trying to think if I've noticed anything. I mean, sometimes the migratory birds arrive and depart slightly different times. Um, but it would be hard, it would be wrong of me to say that I've noticed specific differences. But migratory birds would be a very good indicator of that and the prevalence of certain insects and general temperatures for the months. I'd honestly have to go and check the sort of the climate forecasts and models to give you a solid answer, Ivan. But is global warming a real thing? In my opinion, absolutely it is. We're seeing sufficient evidence of it. Let's quickly go down to Timby, whilst since these giraffe have departed. Yeah, we have some elephant bulls milling around at Tembe. But yeah, I think it's you can pretty much look at any climate models and histories over the last 50 years or so, and almost everywhere has seen an increase in temperature. It may only be 1 or 2 degrees as the average temperature, but that is enough to have a significant knock-on effect, particularly to the vegetation and the availability of certain resources, which will cause animals to adapt to those changes as well. Ivan, that's an intriguing question. I've just done a quick search to see if I can find any specific examples of it having been recorded, and it seems there are some suggestions. So the shifting of ranges of some species, so for example, the mountain zebra has been observed moving to higher altitudes in response to rising temperatures in lower lying areas. Um, some suggestions that various animals have adjusted the time of their breeding season. Remember that breeding season needs to coincide with however long the gestation period of a particular animal is, so that when the youngsters are born, it is done so at the appropriate time, normally during the rains, where there is food, water, and shelter available. Um, Interestingly, there are some suggestions that the Cape robin chat, which is a bird we get down here, are extending their breeding seasons and shifting their feeding habits to adapt to changes in the availability of food sources. Just trying to see if there are any others. Some suggestions that some reptiles are adapting by adjusting their activity patterns, becoming more active during cooler parts of the day, and using microhabitats that are less affected by temperature extremes. So yeah, it seems there have been some recorded examples of it, certainly. And for interest's sake, having just checked as well, the Lowveld, which is where um, I am based, certainly in that area around Kruger, the average temperature does seem to have increased by 1 or 2 degrees over the past century. More common heat waves and extreme temperature spikes. Um, what else? Some areas experiencing more intense rainfall and flooding, and then also longer periods of dry spells. So it's often a slow process, but it does accumulate relatively, say swiftly, but it accumulates slowly, and that can certainly have a knock-on effect. You might think that an increase of only 1 or 2 degrees doesn't sound like much, but in the scheme of things, that can have a massive knock-on effect on entire ecosystems and all the organisms within it. A very sedentary elephant, pretty much having a bit of a upright snooze, it seems. See the way the trunk is resting on the ground, quite common when they are just very much conserving a little bit of energy. And nice to see some impala as well, some of the most incredibly adaptable animals that we have here, accounting for their great numbers in this region of the country or the continent. I remember quite happy eating both types of vegetation, be it grazing or browsing, allows them to access a much greater variety of food resources, allowing them to proliferate in times that other more animals with more specific feeding habits may struggle. dramatic approach from that young elephant in the background. Deb Davis, the birds that you can see in the foreground, those are woolly-necked storks. We do have a variety of stork species that we find here. The woolly-necks are quite common, characterized by those dark feathers and that contrasting, much shorter white feathered neck. And Spassio also saying it's nice to see the woolly necks. Yep, it is. So fairly common. I know some people have been asking recently about the white storks and that some have been seen. I have to say I have not seen any white storks yet this season, but of most of the stork species we get here, those are usually the ones that I don't see very many of. I think it's probably just a question of localized populations. But we've seen plenty of yellow-billed, plenty of woolly necks, saddle-billed marabou. I've seen the occasional black stork, but they're not very common. But the woolly neck storks, if you do want to see them, you need to stick to the eastern side of the country. They're pretty much restricted to sort of KZN, the Kruger area, but then very a lot more easier to find them if you move up into Mozambique and Zimbabwe and the northern parts of Botswana and Namibia. But generally not seen much further west than the Kruger area. And for interest's sake, just having checked, they also occur in India, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Gambia to Sudan, some of Swaziland. See, Ellie, you were also asking about the storks. So yeah, these are the woolly-necked storks that have been busy having a nice preen and a good groom down there in the foreground. Seems our big elephant bull's woken up slightly, just swashing around some of that dust, applying some to the underside of his body. And a very good afternoon to Canine Girl, who has joined us, wishing everybody a happy Sunday. These storks generating quite a lot of interest. Lorraine also asking, so yeah, woolly-necked storks. So keep an eye out for storks. So the marabous, very obvious, huge, great big birds. Not the prettiest things you'll ever see. One of the so-called, rather unfairly, but I think in this case true, ugly five, along with the blue wildebeest, the warthog, the lappet-faced vulture, and particularly unfairly, the spotted hyena, which is actually a beautiful animal, particularly when they're young. I don't like this idea of an ugly five, but it is unfortunately become fairly mainstream thanks to tourism. But of course, the really beautiful ones that we are lucky enough to see every now and again are the saddle-billed storks, enormous birds standing a couple of meters tall with that beautiful beak with red and yellow banding across it. We do sometimes see saddle-bills. Certainly at Juma we used to see them quite regularly. The one that's sort of relatively common in South Africa that doesn't occur on the eastern side of the country, though, is the Abdim stork. I have seen Abdim stork. They theoretically could occur here, but I have never seen one in the Kruger area. But a little bit more common as you go further west towards Gauteng and the Free State area, but also occurring in most of southern Africa. But I've never seen an Abdim stork in Kruger. Okay, let's head over to Simbavati's camera now. What have we got moving through the undergrowth? Ah, beautiful male waterbuck. It's not often we come to Simbavati waterside camera. I don't know if we've been here recently. I can't remember being here, but this is nice for me to see a slightly different location. It's a beautiful male waterbuck who's hiding behind the browning grass and what looks like an apple leaf tree there on the right-hand side. For those of you who were listening yesterday, no sign of my waterbuck who paid us a visit last night at home, who did even leave some tracks in the garden. Obviously found some nice grass to his liking. It's still very nice to see, but did have a group of dwarf mongoose running around this morning, which is always a delight to watch. Oh, but the terrapin just emerging from the water on the left as well. Look, decided it's too hot. We're going to go back inside. Beautiful markings on this waterbuck. Seems very, very prominent white above the eyes, more so than I would normally expect to see. The warthog in the background. Penelope Kenyon, you're enjoying this new camera at Simbavati. Yeah, hopefully we'll see some interesting things come a-calling here. beautiful antelope, the waterbuck, especially those big males with those lovely sweeping forward-facing horns and those ridges. Of course, everybody's favourite aspects of the waterbuck, the white ring on the bottom, and their beautiful heart-shaped nose as well. VC, you're saying it was lovely for me to have a waterbuck in my garden. It was. Been very fortunate here. We've had inyalas and porcupine and genet and a daker that comes through pretty much every day, banded and dwarf mongoose. But it was the first time that I'd seen a waterbuck here, so I was very chuffed with that one. And as I said, yesterday he chilled outside a lot of yesterday morning, 30, 40 meters away, and seemed quite happy with me moving around outside, just ruminating, watching from a distance. So I hope that he will become a regular visitor. Had to chase a few zebras away from the garden as well, but I imagine that's going to become more of a problem as we move into winter and available resources elsewhere die off. So we may have quite a few animals trying to take advantage of some, hopefully, green grass if I can keep it so. BC, I'm glad you find the antelope really interesting. They are, and they're so pretty, some of them. They're so delicate. It amazes me how they can run at such speeds and be so agile on, in some cases, those kind of really toothpick thin legs. So much power, elasticity in the tendons and the muscles in there to allow them to evade predators. But some really beautiful examples of antelopes and some magnificent ones as well. Nothing more so than a big male kudu with those spiraling horns or a massive eland bull is very, very impressive. But even some of the smaller members, the Dacre family, we only really have the common Dacre in this area, but other areas of South Africa, the red Dacre are very, very pretty. We occasionally get a Grijsbok in this area, which are rather nice to look at as well, a little bit more rotund and with a few spots dotted around. Oribi, it's another one that I don't see very often. And then if you go a little bit further west or further north, you can get the beautiful little diminutive ones like the dik-diks, which are incredibly cute. Okay, seems that we have jetted all the way down to Betty's Bay to Stony Point. We're going to catch up with our Dussies. She's looking rather inquisitively towards the camera, it seems. Lucy, you're asking about the life expectancy of a waterbuck. Well, again, dependent upon many factors, but assuming we'll take the bell curve and the average, probably in the wild somewhere between 10 to 15 years. Obviously based on area and available food and water and number of predators in that particular area. In captivity, animals will always live longer because they have far less stresses to deal with. So maybe 20, early, maybe even mid-20s in captivity, but out in the wild, probably 12 to 15 years, I would think, would be average. This little Dassie or Hyrax looks a bit grumpy in the foreground. Maybe didn't have a particularly good night. or a glimpse of those modified incisors, like very similar to elephant tusks. The one at the back having a groom. Of course, many people know of the relationship between the rock hyrax and elephants in terms of the teeth structure, the foot structure being what we call near ungulates, having internal testes and various other things, but also shares some similarities with hippos, believe it or not, in terms of their digestion. The hippos and hyraxes are both considered hindgut fermenters, but instead of just having a singular stomach like horses, rhinos and elephants, they have a multi-chambered stomach but are not considered ruminants, so we classify them as pseudo-ruminants along with hippos. They have a three-chambered stomach, but still have the fermentation process happens sort of after the true digestion, I believe. So hence still hindgut digestion. Just an adaptation, I think, to deal with a lot of the fibrous material that they need. Eli and Gina Biddle both commenting on how cute these dussies are. Yeah, some little youngsters there in the background. But they are very cute. Little chunky little things, incredibly agile over the rocks regardless of their body shape. Almost look like little seals, don't they? You can see nice thick fur, which will just help to insulate them, because they're very poor at thermoregulating, sleep in bundles of each other in piles to try and conserve that body heat. And I would imagine that, rather like the klipspringer, those thick hair also act as a bit of a shock absorber should they lose their grip on some of these rocks and go a-tumbling. Also very efficient kidneys. You think if you are restricted to a very specific habitat like rocky outcrops, there's not much water there, so they are very adept at keeping water within their body for long periods of time, and you can often see where hyraxes have been staying or where they've been sleeping and spending a lot of time, those white stains of uric acid, more like you would associate with reptiles and bird droppings. Just a way of keeping as much moisture in the body as possible, not losing so much in the process of urination. So a very specialized animal to make use of this ecological niche that it's carved out for itself. As well as their ability of their pupils to get very, 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 very small to deal with direct sunlight in these exposed areas, and also help them check out any potential marauding predators. They are taken by eagles quite regularly that will fly over these rocks and look for dussies, and should it be bright sunshine, very difficult to spot an aerial predator like that, but they have that ability to do so. Their eyes are specially adapted to deal with very bright sunshine, almost like having built-in polarized sunglasses. Good afternoon, Jive Bunny. I see you have joined us. Thank you for asking how we're all doing. I am doing very well, thank you. I've got Mika in my ear now. She's taken over from Tadiwa, who's telling me what's happening on the other cams and instructing me on where we're going to go next. So I hope Mika is doing well, as all the folk are in Ravonia. And Canine Girl, you're asking, what is the Dussie's main role within the ecosystem? For those of you who are unaware, Dussie and Hyrax are names that we use interchangeably. So Hyrax is the official name for it. A Dussie is more of a colloquial term, actually coming from an old European word meaning badger, because they look a little bit similar to badgers, although they are not related to them in any way, shape or form. But in terms of their role within the ecosystem, while being grazing or herbivorous animals, I should say, they do a good job in terms of seed dispersal. Certainly important food for predators, as we've mentioned already. They also do dig around looking for roots and other parts of plants, which is helpful for soil aeration and reprocessing of any sort of compacted soils. And as an indicator species as well, generally considered, if you've got lots of hyraxes in your area, then your ecosystem is probably in a fairly good state, because they are very sensitive to changes in environmental conditions. Yeah, so those are probably the main ones, I would think. And nice to see our little African penguins in their little hidey hole there that we saw yesterday. Looks like there might be at least 3 in there. I wondered maybe if there was some sort of nesting going on, but if we've got 3 in there, perhaps not. Maybe it's just a nice shelter, and they've got the curtains drawn with that vegetation hanging down in front of them. Maybe it is only 2. Maybe that was just another part of the one in the foreground that I saw. Let's hope that this is a little nesting site then, and we've got a pair in there. If it is, and it's within view of the camera, this might be a wonderful opportunity to watch things progress. I don't know if people have been watching this camera a lot, whether they've seen any sort of courtship behavior going on between these 2 individuals, possibly bringing of gifts of things like pebbles to the female by the male. Just trying to check what the incubation period and things are, so we might get a better idea. Looks like the incubation period is around about 40 days, somewhere between 38 and 42 days, where they'll take turns incubating the eggs. Is that an egg underneath her there, or him? Possibly something white that I saw underneath. We'll have to see if there are eggs there and they do hatch. The young one should stay within the nest area for possibly up to 2 months. So some great opportunities to witness that. Let's cross fingers that we are going to see that over the coming months. It'll be very, very special to keep an eye on. Penelope Kenyon, you're referring to them as lovebirds. We do have lovebirds, of course, out here as well, which have been introduced. But yeah, they're very, very cute penguins, aren't they? And Jive Bunny, you say there's a garden in Cape Town that has nesting penguins, and sometimes they have a cam up inside the nest to see it all happen. It's amazing we can do that now in nest boxes and things and watch these intimate moments play out. We're very, very fortunate, but how nice would it be if we could keep a daily eye on them during these live waterhole shows as well. Gina, you're enjoying the sound of the surf in the background. I see it is rather therapeutic, isn't it? Always nice, many people drawn to the ocean. And Jenny D, you said when you were at school, uh, you sneaked a dassie onto a Sunday walk and put it down your shirt. Um, it wasn't a very good idea and there were fleas everywhere. I can imagine that was the case, Jenny D, and I suggest that you don't try that one again. That was probably rather uncomfortable for both you and the Dussie to some extent. I hope the Dussie was returned from wherever you got it from, unless it was a pet. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend putting Dussies down your shirt as a generalised rule. They've also got quite sharp teeth. But we've all done things like that. I used to have a hamster which I used to take to school with me sometimes. I used to keep him in my pocket occasionally. Scruffy, the hamster. Many, many years ago now. I seem to remember when Scruffy did pass on and I got a replacement. He was also called Scruffy. That was Scruffy 2, my original naming method. And I had 3 Russian hamsters at one point that were called Snap, Crackle and Pop, I think. But yes, various pets gone through my ownership over the years. My parents are very tolerant. Everything from stick insects to hamsters to gerbils to dogs, cats, birds, guinea pigs, rabbits. Many, many things over the years. A few cormorants today. Sometimes that rock is completely filled with cormorants, Cape cormorants, and the occasional white-breasted cormorants as well. Possibly a white-breasted one on the right, hard to see for sure. Okay, we are going to head elsewhere. So unfortunately, I didn't quite catch where, but let's go have a look. Ah, Safari Hook in Namibia. How nice to see so much water in Namibia. And another waterbuck, a female this time. I see before we get too distracted, having just come from Betty's Bay, Gina Biddle, you're asking how many penguins reside there. Well, I have just had a quick check, and it seems to be potentially up to about 1,600 breeding pairs, I think. Well, that was in 2021, so I'm not sure what it is right now. I'll see if I can get a more recent, possibly as over 2,000 breeding pairs now. I'll see if I can find a more up-to-date figure for you. And Susie Seatown, you're asking, is the Simbavati waterhole camera new? Susie Seatown, I'm not 100% sure. I don't think that I have visited it during one of my live at the waterhole sessions before, but I do think it is pretty recent, but I couldn't tell you exactly how recent it is. But I think within the past, well, recent times, let's just leave it at that. I'll see if we can dig out an actual figure as to when it came online for you. But always nice to see, and a nice one to have in the Sabi Sands there. Sorry, not at the Sabi Sands. I think it's actually in Kasiri, I think. Or Timbavati, Kasiri, that area. Not a lodge that I have been to, but I'm sure it is very, very nice. Wildlife lady, yes, the waterbuck having a Sunday rest after a meal. If they're very fortunate, they were lucky enough to have one of Mum's roast dinners. One thing I still miss dearly about my time in England with family, although I'm excited to say that my parents are coming to visit in about a week's time, and my mum may not know it yet, but my only request is for her to put together a slap-up Sunday meal so I can reminisce on those times. Particularly mum's gravy. I miss mum's gravy. I've tried very hard to emulate it, but am unable to do so. Having grown up in England, I'm a big fan of gravy with roast dinners. But yeah, that's pretty much what I look like after one of those roast dinners, curled up on the sofa, put a little bit of Sunday afternoon sport on, and have a very relaxing digestion, although I tend not to ruminate too often. Very proud blacksmith lapwing atop his rock. You see in the background as well a lot of what looks like datura, otherwise known as thorn apple, which is an invasive plant, also with rather dangerous hallucinogenic properties if taken in large, well, even in small amounts. Those are the sorts of things that normally, if we find them, we try and pull those up. If it is indeed datura, that's what it looks like. Canine girl, you're saying that that waterbuck is stunning and it's your favorite alongside the oryx. Well, I'm with you on the oryx. They're one of my favorite antelope species out here. I just think they're absolutely gorgeous with those color schemes that they've got. Oh, look at the little tiny one. Hello, little one. You're hiding in the grass. Now you can see that beautiful heart-shaped nose. He's very young. It didn't say how young it is, but waterbuck, like many antelope, have what we call a lying up period, where the calf will stay fairly sedentary in one spot, and mum would go off and feed and come back repeatedly to give milk and just check up on the youngster. Now, whether this one is just hanging out here as part of that lying up period, I don't think this one is more than a few months old, um, or whether it's just taking a rest after a trek to the water with the rest of the group that we saw just now. I'm not sure. But regardless, very, very sweet little fluff ball. Ellie, you're also enjoying the waterbuck bebe. Bebe, as you put it, absolutely. It's like another youngster there. Fan, you're saying it's crazy that the datura is growing wildly there, given its toxic properties. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any danger to the animals, whether they just choose to avoid it. This is also a very young one. Sweet man. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about it. I think it's from South America recently, originally, but I know it has been, I should use the word abused by people because of its hallucinogenic properties, but it can have disastrous consequences. I believe in Afrikaans it is known as mulputter. And yeah, I think occasionally people have overdone the dosage of it, whatever that may be, and probably regretted it. But it does grow quite prevalently in certain areas. But say, whenever I find any, particularly if I'm sort of out on a walk in a reserve, I'll always try and just uproot it. It's not like some things like a prickly pear that you can cut down and just leave and it'll just re-sprout and grow again. As long as you pull it out by the roots, that should be the end of it. But these alien vegetations do often do very well, particularly close to water. But I suppose it does allow a little bit of shelter for little ones like this waterbuck. I believe it's in the same family as the nightshades, so the Solanum family, which would also make sense due to its toxic nature. Just doing a little bit of a check on that datura. Originally came from the Americas, certainly, but spread most places. And yeah, highly toxic, especially the seeds and the leaves, due to various alkaloids, including some with multiple syllables that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, but has been used in traditional medicine, used in very small doses to treat conditions like motion sickness, asthma, and pain, but very much not recommended. Yes, due to the fact that it can be fatal if misused. So please be very aware of datura. So given its toxic nature, I assume that the animals realize this and avoid it. I've never heard of there being any sort of datura-based poisoning amongst animals. But remember, a lot of animals have different digestive systems that can deal with a lot of those toxins. Take black rhinos and porcupines, well known for eating the euphorbia plants and the tambuotes, both of which contain that highly, highly toxic white milky latex that can be fatal in humans. I have seen a black rhino feeding on a euphorbia leaf, almost like a succulent, almost looks like a cactus. And just this white milky latex streaming down its face, and absolutely no problems for the black rhino at all. So remember, things have different stomachs evolved to utilize different things. But word of advice, just because you see a black rhino eating something doesn't mean you can eat it. Okay, I think we're going to head back up to Kenya to Lentor. Let's see what we've got there. Ah, we've gone from baboons to vervets. A lovely little family group, all the youngsters again. Canine Go, you're asking whether there's any purpose behind the heart-shaped noses of the waterbuck we were just viewing. I don't think so specifically, Canine Girl. A lot of the antelope noses are that sort of triangular shaped. I imagine that the specific shapes may assist in terms of getting the appropriate amount of smell or scent particles in there, but whether there's any benefit from the specific shape of the waterbuck versus any of the other antelope species, I'm not aware of. I would have thought if it was a particularly efficient shape, then other antelopes would have also adopted that exact shape, where maybe it's just more obvious in waterbuck. But I think most antelope have that sort of yeah, triangular shaped nose at least. As to things like dogs, certainly there are little subtle differences. Dogs have got those sort of little channels which just enable the scent to be circulated properly. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I have no doubt there'll be specific differences that will benefit that particular species. Oh, look, a little kiss, a vervet monkey kiss. How cute. They always just look so mischievous, these things. The monkeys are all hiding. It's such a perfect tree for the vervets, I would think. Perfect little climbing frame, a jungle gym. Not sure if they've disappeared into the background or if they're just on the back side of the tree. We will keep an eye out and see. A case of the disappearing vervets. Well, while there's a little bit of a lull, I suppose it's a good opportunity. Oh, it's some firefinches on the left. To remind all of you, particularly in the northern hemisphere, that hopefully you got to see the lunar eclipse that we had a few days ago or last week. But there is also a partial solar eclipse upcoming on the 29th. Which will give you some opportunity to view it. So if you are, for example, in England, you'll get about a 30% eclipse. That's going to be around 11 o'clock in the morning. Where else might we have people? If you go a little bit sort of further south into Europe, around Spain and Portugal, 20-25% of it will be eclipsed. If you're up in Scotland, you might get up to 40% or so. And over in the States, New York, Boston, Montreal, you'll also get to see a decent amount. I think way up in the north of Canada is the best place to see the maximum amount of the eclipse. I think it's going to get up to about 90% or so if you up into the Newfoundland area. But if you are planning on viewing that solar eclipse, please do not look at the sun directly, especially through any magnifying equipment, binoculars, telescope, without the appropriate filters, and even just looking at it with the naked eye can be very dangerous. So make sure you've got some eclipse glasses or make yourself a little pinhole camera. Please do not look at the sun directly. It is not good for you and will likely end in disaster. But very often the case when things line up on those what we call nodes. If you get a lunar eclipse, it'll usually be followed quite quickly afterwards, so about 2 weeks afterwards, when the moon has moved halfway around its orbit in terms of its phases. Remember, it's full moon when we have a lunar eclipse, and basically happens at new moon when there is a solar eclipse. So quite normal for them to happen in pairs, just because the alignment of the Earth, Sun, and the Moon happen to line up on those times. So you normally get one, and then 2 weeks later you'll get the other. Okay, well, activity seems to have dried up a bit at Lentor. Let's head back down to Tembe in Maputo land and see what those Ellies are up to. But if any of you are interested in observing that solar eclipse on the 29th, there are websites that you can go to and you can check your specific time zones as to when the peak of the eclipse is going to happen. I did double check a couple of them. So in New York, for example, it's going to be 7 o'clock in the morning local time. In London, it will be 11 o'clock in the morning local time. Um, Germany 11:30, Paris 11 o'clock. But very cool thing to say that you've witnessed a total solar eclipse is a really almost uncomfortable feeling. I saw an almost total one when I was much younger in the UK, and I remember it vividly. The whole area goes dark, and all the birds stop singing, and there's just this strange unease that falls across the landscape. And Ken, you were saying you used to keep old film negatives to look at eclipses. I've heard a variety of those ones, like the old foil packaging that tea comes into, but I would certainly not advocate for using anything other than proper equipment, which has been approved just in case. But it is a cool thing to be able to see see that sort of dynamic nature of the solar system and beyond. Makes you feel a part of something much bigger. I'd say relatively brief things, even at a total solar eclipse, if you are in the path of the totality, I think its maximum only lasts about 7 minutes, whereas a lunar eclipse lasts an awful lot bigger, just purely because the moon is a lot smaller, and so it doesn't obstruct the sun for such a long period of time. Gina Biddle, you say you saw the total eclipse in Ohio last year. It was fascinating, beautiful, and strange. I think those are all very appropriate words. You say you're very lucky to be in the path of the totality. It's a very narrow strip, say, due to the very small shadow that the moon casts onto the Earth. But yeah, very special to see it. And people travel all over the world, eclipse chasers, to put themselves in that path of totality. Wildlife Lady, I'm glad you've enjoyed today's live at the waterhole. We've seen some fun stuff, as always. Nice to see the baboons and the vervets. I think probably my favourite was watching those baboons, particularly with the youngster. Some really intimate moments that we shared with the baboons there. But I'm glad you've enjoyed it, Wildlife Lady. I hope everybody else has. And I will pass on your thanks to FC in Johannesburg and all the Zoomies helping us with the cameras. I'm taking a couple of days off. I think I will be back on, what's today? Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I think I'm doing Thursday and Friday at least. I believe Kelly is taking it over from me tomorrow and the next day. But I will look forward to returning and seeing what else these wonderful cameras have on offer for us. And thank you to all of you for sending in all of your questions and comments. We can't do this show without you, and it really makes all the difference. So thank you very much. Fan, you're saying you had a total solar eclipse visible in New York last year, but you couldn't see it because of cloud cover. That's a shame. But yes, unnerving darkness at full solar eclipse. An amazing thing to witness, certainly. But we're almost out of time, everybody. We only have about 20 seconds or so left. So thanks very much for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I hope it is wonderful and relaxing and exciting all at the same time. And do tune in later this afternoon for the Sunset Safari and join us again tomorrow for more Live at the Waterhole. Have a lovely day.